Welcome to the Executive Hustle podcast, where I am your host, Kirsten Urich, speaker, author, retired CEO, mother of four, and recovering workaholic. Explore with Central Pennsylvania local executives what it takes to lead well, live well, and learn well. Understanding that leaders cannot survive, let alone thrive, without a spirit of curiosity, a discipline of accountability, and a disposition for vulnerability. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Executive Hustle podcast. Today's special episode, we dive deep back into one of the three leadership domains introduced back in February. Oh, I can't believe it's been so long. But the three leadership domains that all leaders must master. They are leading themselves, leading teams, and leading things, the systems and processes that produce the business results. Today, we're going to talk about leading things, the domain that's specifically around how senior leaders, middle management harnesses the systems and the processes that create the real and sustainable impact of their organizations. Look, you can be a nice guy or a nice gal, but if you're not getting much done in your team or organization, you won't last. And if you do last at a company, that company is not going to last. We have to produce results as a leader. Now we move from getting things done as a leader to seeing that things get done as a leader. And so we are getting things done through people. And there's a universal truth that we don't fail as leaders for a lack of effort, but we fail or succeed based on the quality of the systems and the processes that we build around us and the results that we track. One of my favorite leadership gurus is Peter Drucker, and he said, what gets measured gets managed. And that gets down to whether we measure it or not, what gets our attention is what's going to get our activity and get our management time and energy, right? So if we're not looking at it, we can't deal with it. So if we're not clear on our outcomes and where we're going, we're not managing the system. And that's when chaos is going to creep in. People are going to have confusion and friction. And everything else requires leadership. So first step in managing things as a leader, leading things, we have to define what success is and what it isn't. The foundation of results leadership is ruthless clarity. Leaders must define and then declare, we have to communicate what winning looks like, not in generic terms, but in very precise, very real, communicable language about what are the results and objectives that we want our teams to produce. One of the universal examples that everyone uses is Apple as an example, right? Their product launch deadlines and their defined user experiences are sacred. They cherish simplicity and the way the user experiences their products. It's art. It's creativity. They're not into things that are clunky and challenging for the user. They really want this streamlined experience. They know who and what they stand for. And that drives everything else that they do. That level of clarity within your teams and your processes is what's going to move you to the next level of leading things. A common practice to instill clarity in high-performing teams is what we call the mantra. It's your quarterly sprint, your rock, your thematic goal, whatever your model is that you're using as an organization, whether you're using Rockefeller Habits, EOS, high performing teams, whatever it is, the 4 disciplines of execution, it doesn't matter what your system is. They all have some pretty basic and common similarities. You have to have that common theme over a specific period of time that puts something over and above everything else as most important, right? Which direction are we all rowing in that's most important right now, right? Something that's more important than keeping the lights on and hiring, firing. We all know we're doing those things, but what else is most important right now? How clear are you on what that is and how are we measuring it? If you're not sure what that is, or you think you're sure, but you are not entirely clear on how everyone else thinks about that specific mantra, my advice is ask. Ask your team members. What do you think our monthly goal is? What's important right now? What's everyone working on? Outside of our regular standard operating procedures and our, revenue goals and our sales goals and things like that, what's the company most about right now? You should get one answer. If you get many answers, this quick exercise tells you that you've got an opportunity here to focus. The company, the team, everyone needs to know and be crystal clear on what a win is for that team. What is most important? After we clarify what is most important, where we are going, then we have to get super simple and super effective around what the system is that's going to get us there. And it may sound trite, but it's actually quite difficult to make a simple system. There's a whole book on being simple. And it's really difficult because it's very easy to make a complex system, but to take the discipline and to try to shave and reduce something down to its most discrete and important parts can be a very laborious process. So the strongest systems do not succeed because they're complex, but because they're radically simple, scalable, and I argue visible. Many of those systems that I mentioned earlier, Rockefeller habits, EOS, 4 disciplines of execution, they all revolve around just a handful of priorities, a handful of disciplines. You set your direction, you make it clear. You measure things that tell you if you're on track or off track. You review them regularly and you update accordingly. That's about it. It sounds simple, yet our consistent application of these simple things is where the rubber meets the road. Adding a couple of things that I've learned over a few decades, especially in the monitoring segment here, making your monitoring system as visible as possible is going to add value. Making the monitoring system as public as possible is going to add value. Including the people closest to the numbers, closest to who's generating those numbers is going to add value. And making the numbers as team-oriented as possible. I'm a big fan of people having individual numbers. Absolutely. People having individual performance-based numbers can be very valuable, but many employment environments are not ready for these types of systems. So in the early stages, only use measurement systems to celebrate. Celebrate your numbers and where they're getting you. Never punish or criticize when you're first putting in measurement systems. Most people have unpleasant histories with being measured. If you want to have a real life example of that, go into your bathroom and glance at the scale. What comes up when you do that? Probably unpleasant feelings. Most of us have unpleasant histories when it comes to being measured, right? So if you're introducing measurement for the first time in your organization, use these numbers to acknowledge wins and use it as information to adjust the process and procedure, never to admonish people. You are trying to use these numbers to get everybody to where they're going, never, as they say, to beat the sheep. All right, so we're leading things. We've talked about having clarity about where we're going. We've talked about making simple and performance-based measurement visible, and being relentless about those two things. So when we know where we're going, what's most important, and how to measure it, the last thing that becomes important is the who. And by this, I mean accountability. Accountability is going to show up as a competency under this leadership domain, so leading things, and it's going to show up as a competency under the leadership domain of leading teams. So we'll probably end up talking about this twice. But starting with accountability here, let's review what accountability is not. Accountability should not be a once in the wild thing, only when things go wrong. And what happens to everybody else but the leader. In our strongest organizations, accountability is woven into moment-to-moment interactions and happens at every level of organization, starting with the leader. The best modern-day thinker on accountability that I've encountered probably in the last 5 years is Robert Teschner, aka Cujo, a former F-16 pilot and Air Force Top Gun instructor. You can find his book, Debrief to Win. I have a link in the show notes. And he lays out the military's process for debriefing missions, or what we would call in the business world, projects, right? And through this debrief process that he lays out, the leader and the team can practice accountability by evaluating the quality of the actions and decisions of all the team members, especially the leader, that occurred during a mission or project. And they can evaluate, hey, how did that go, right? Did we do the things we said we were going to do? Did we make the decisions? And how did they turn out? What can we learn from that? And it creates a safe way to practice accountability that's not a blame or a finger pointing opportunity, but a learning opportunity. And my favorite quote by Cujo has to do with a leader and the idea that a leader who has not planned or set his team up for success by creating a plan does not have the right to practice accountability. In other words, if you have not set clear goals, if you don't have objectives, and if you don't measure what's important, and you haven't laid out who will be doing what and by when, you don't get to point any fingers when things don't go the way you expected them to go. The only finger that gets to be pointed is back at you as the leader, because you didn't create the conditions for which you could practice accountability. And I think that's just a great lesson. And it doesn't come without the opportunity for, okay, but how do I do that? And so I really encourage you to check out that resource. I think it's an excellent opportunity for leaders to grow both in planning and the accountability side through that debrief. So the next time something doesn't go as expected, the first question to ask is not, who do I blame? Who didn't do what they were supposed to do? The first question to ask is, how did I set up my team for success or not? And my favorite coaching question, for those of you who know me, what was my role in this? What part did I play? That is how great leaders practice accountability. And the more you do that in front of your team, the more your team will show up for you and saying, well, actually, that was my role. Actually, I take a part in that. You model what you want from those around you. All right, so leading systems and results and processes. This is one of our 3 leadership domains. You have to master this if you want to get to the next level. It is not set it and forget it. This is not crockpot leadership. These are constant habits that leaders work on and refine over and over and over again. I am still learning these lessons day in and day out, and I've got decades of experience in this stuff, and I'm still getting better at it because leadership is a practice. It's like going to the gym every day. Leaders are constantly working at getting better, at becoming crystal clear. I can work with somebody who's got decades and decades of leadership experience, and we'll sit and we'll debrief a situation. They'll be like, damn it, I wasn't clear, was I? Well, maybe you could have been clearer. What could have been clearer there, right? We're always getting better at being clear, making our systems simpler, reducing that friction for our teams, and creating that culture of accountability. And it starts at the top. A great quote I want to share is from a CEO client of mine. He said recently, I tend to focus on the people, the process, and the product. And when I do that, the profits take care of themselves. I could not say it better myself. In this episode, we covered one of the three of the essential leadership domains: leading things, such as processes, results, the things that help us get the work done. In the next deep dive, we're probably going to talk about leading teams, because I'm going to save talking about leading ourselves for last, because that is the hardest leadership domain to master, leading ourselves. Until then, keep your goals clear, keep your progress and performance visible, and remember, likely some of this was your fault. And that's okay. We're all okay. We're all human. Just show up tomorrow and try again. Until next time, Executive Hustle listeners. Thank you for joining me today for another great hustle conversation with the Central PA Executive. You can find out more about my guest in the show notes. And if you liked the episode or have something to add to our conversation, please find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Subscribe, rate, and review. Remember, leadership is best practiced in community. You know a leader who needs to hear something from this episode, so pay it forward and send it to them today. Don't wait. Until next time, the best leaders not only lead well, they live well and learn well. Bye now.